we're watching is The Illustrated Man.
1969.
1969, science fiction classic based on the Ray Bradbury novel, starring Rod Steiger, his wife Claire Bloom, and Robert Dreyfuss.
Don't dare stare at the illustrated man.
There are fearful pictures on his skin, but the most fearful thing is tattooed on his soul. The Illustrated Man, Ray Bradbury's masterpiece of the supernatural, an incredible journey to the outer limits of imagination. The Illustrated Man, starring Rod Steiger and Claire Bloom, from Warner Brothers 7 Arts in Technicolor. This picture is rated M.
And now playing exclusively at Pacific's Pickwood Theater in Wendy Westwood.
I actually saw this at the theater in 1969 when I was 7 years of age. I saw it because we saw a lot of movies back then, and they used to show the trailer a lot for The Illustrated Man at the theaters. I'm like, oh, I want to see that. That looks cool. I want to see The Illustrated Man. I want to see The Illustrated Man. So me and my mom and my stepfather, we went to see The Illustrated Man. Okay, but right now I'm going to read the back of the box. This is a Warner Home Video. We look to science fiction to glimpse the future. And no science fiction writer has more gripping or disturbing ability to make the future real than Ray Bradbury, the author whose works like Fahrenheit 451, The Martian Chronicles, and Something Wicked This Way Comes qualify him as one of the genre's supreme shapers. The Illustrated Man brings to the screen one of Bradbury's most terrifyingly imaginative visions, the story of a man whose very body paints pictures of horrors to come. Rod Steiger stars as Carl, a carnival roustabout and master weaver of tales whose skin has become almost entirely illustrated with freakishly vivid tattoos. Skin illustrations.
Skin illustrations.
There is a space on his torso, however, that remains untouched. Yet if one looks there long enough, the most powerful of all the illustrations appears: the future. Weaving stories within stories, The Illustrated Man begins when a young drifter, Robert Dreyfuss, meets Carl and becomes fixated by his multicolored tattoos to a degree that becomes alarming, for they reveal dark secrets of the past and 3 shocking depictions of the future. 2 playful children use a most ingenious toy to conjure up a surprise for their unsuspecting parents. Then, Carl becomes the lone survivor of an astronaut crew shipwrecked on a planet of eternal rain. Finally, as the end of the world approaches, parents plan for their own children's destruction. When the young man returns from his forays into the future, he finds that the most nightmarish vision of all is yet to be seen. It is his own destiny, about to unfold in the lethal future all too near. The Illustrated Man ingeniously heralds the multi-episode format that has once again proven irresistible in popular television programs like Amazing Stories and The Twilight Zone, with remarkable performances from Steiger and Claire Bloom and the awesome originality of Bradbury's genius. It will hold your attention as powerfully as its heroes' illustrations.
Never mind that Bradbury wasn't consulted on the screenplay.
Roger, since you are the biggest Bradbury fan in the room, I'm assuming, and have also even read the book and have been a fan of the movie for a long time, why don't you start? What did you think?
First off, the book is 18 short stories, very, very loosely held together by a very short prologue and a very short epilogue, like a half-page epilogue. And the rest of it is just these short stories. And you're just given the idea of these skin illustrations that move and squirm around on his body. And that when you look into them, you fall into it like some kind of Stendhal syndrome. Mm-hmm. And what you see is the future. And in general, I think most of the stories were futures. And most of them are like kind of almost dystopian ideas of futures and of human behavior in those times. Mm-hmm. They choose 3 stories out of these 18 stories. And I picked up...
let me ask you a question about that. Part of the thing about the movie is Rod Steiger is the Illustrated Man. He's got these tattoos on his body. It takes place in either like the 20s or the 30s. And he's a hobo, and he bumps into this other guy on the road who's like another hobo. And then they talk, you actually think that Rod Steiger is going to beat him to death.
Yeah.
You think he's just
A violent hobo.
a violent hobo. You think he's going to get robbed and beaten to death, and
An LA hobo.
he takes off his shirt and he reveals all the illustrations that he has on him, and he starts kind of telling the story about how they all came to be.
People want to look at them.
But then Robert Dreyfuss will like look at the lion tattoo, or then look at the rocket tattoo, or then look at this tattoo. And then we just kind of go into these stories. And so the movie is basically, it's made up of these 3 stories, when it keeps coming back to this framing episode that is terrific.
Yeah.
Between Robert Dreyfuss and Rod Steiger. You've read the book. Do you think they picked the right 3 stories?
No. And in fact, well, yes. First of all, The Veldt, which is the first story in the book and the first story in the movie, which is basically a holodeck story. They choose The Veldt. They choose one called The Long Rain, which you mentioned, and then they choose one called The Last Night of the World. They use flavors from the other story to kind of create a greater framing for it, which is that the illustrated man has basically been tattooed by a witch, in the movie, and that
That's not in the book?
not necessarily. It's the
whole witch woman thing.
Well, no, the woman is there. Her house disappeared. I think he saw her in Wisconsin, but she, it's vanished. He hasn't been able to find her again, and he is looking for her. All of that is in there. Like she went, and the house went with her. That's that's absolutely from the book. But they definitely make more of it. They make more of his relationship with her.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, because that's making it a movie.
Okay, so I think The Veldt is absolutely the best story in the book. I think The Long Rain is a really, really great story. I even think The Last Night of the World is a good story. But when I was going through my original copy of the book, which is a Bantam.
By the way, I have that copy, and it's the exact same edition.
Yeah, it's
the exact same one.
I love this edition. However, the pages have yellowed enough where it's like actually super difficult to read unless under bright light. But I discovered that I had dog-eared a page in it. And so I was like, oh, what's that? And because I was looking through all the stories again, and I came upon 0 Hour, which I had dog-eared because I remembered that was the story I wanted to tell. Like when I read this book, that's the one I wanted to make into a short movie.
Oh my God. You know what? I'm now having a memory of this years ago when we were younger. All right. You mentioning that you wanted to do one of the stories from The Illustrated Man.
And I figured out which one it is. It's called 0 Hour, but it's too close, I think, thematically to The Veldt. And I'll tell you exactly why. 0 Hour is about, the kids are acting weird. Kids are acting strange. And the parents are trying to figure it out. And
you mean children all over?
Well, they're kids, but then they're behaving strangely. They're doing strange things. They're like acting. They're doing things in secret, and they're trying to figure it out. And what they basically realize in this kind of slow burn, they very gradually discover there's an alien invasion occurring, and that the kids are part of it. They're helping the aliens because they all hate their parents. And the end is like the kids basically revealing to the aliens where the parents are hiding. And it's such a great thriller.
You mean like Village of the Damned kind of thing?
Yeah, well, I mean, the kids aren't evil. The kids have just all gotten together and decided, let's support the alien invasion. Yeah. Let's support 0 Hour. Like they're all kind of part of it. It's a great, great story. It's fantastic, but it's really, really close to The Veldt. The Veldt is the story about this futuristic home. A lot of changes were made to the book by Howard Kreitzik, who is he was a producer who became a writer. I looked him up. I wasn't really aware of his work. One of the things about the Veldt story is these kids, they're living in this house that does everything for them. It wipes your ass. It feeds you. The table cut my dinner for me and fed it to me. Everything is done for them. And everything that they do, which are usually very nostalgic ideas, because it's Bradbury's 1920s, 1930s ideas, like sitting on the porch, for example. The porch will rock the rocker for you. You don't have to rock it yourself. Everything is like that. And the whole gestalt of it is that the parents are just trying to do everything for their kids. Constantly, everything for their kids, and trying to give them everything that they want. And the whole story is almost a cautionary tale about overindulging children, because what effectively happens is they give them this nursery that can be anything. It can be Humpty Dumpty. It can be like
it can be
nursery rhymes type stuff.
When they get it, okay, if the kids want to turn it into Wonderland, from Alice in Wonderland.
They mention Alice in Wonderland.
Okay. That's easy enough for them to do. If they want to turn it into Big Rock Candy Mountain, they can do that. If they want to turn it into Teddy Bear Land, they can do that. But if they want to turn it into England during the bubonic plague, they can do that as well.
And that was never planned upon because no one ever thought that the children would be thinking about thoughts of death so intensely. And what the parents are hearing are familiar screams coming from the thing at night where the kids are playing in it. And they go down there, and what the kids are effectively doing is living again and again the fantasy of just killing their parents, having lions kill their parents in the African veldt.
Yeah, it's all taking place in the Serengeti.
Serengeti.
Yeah, and it just has these like wild lions out there. And then the basis of the start of the story in the movie is Rod Steiger and his wife looking at these lions and go, what the fuck are these kids doing? What's with all these lions and these horrible, terrible birds, these vultures? Why the hell are they hanging out here? And then they talk to the son about it. And
why would the kids want to be here?
Yeah. What's with these fucking lions?
Yeah. There is no psychologist.
It's all disturbing. Yeah.
There is no psychologist in the book. The parents are going to be going away. They're turning off the house and they're turning off the veldt. And that's just too much for the kids. And it ends in very much the same way.
This story started me off on the bad thing about how I felt about the movie.
Yeah, you had a technical problem.
Well, I had a bit, and it gets worse and worse and worse, all right, as it goes on. Because
by technical, I mean a logistical problem.
Yeah, a logistical problem.
Which I actually tried to solve for you. You brought up to me the idea that this is just a projection. It's crystalline walls and the all of which get painted with light. And it's so realistic. And it's such a realistic depiction down to the finest details of grass on the ground that you just believe that it is that.
Yeah.
I was using Star Trek as a way to explain why the lions could kill the parents in real life, as far as force fields and matter replication.
And
which is the excuse in Star Trek on how the holodeck works.
Yeah, but the thing about it is, if he wants a cup of coffee, it just materializes a cup. And you were using...
And that is not in the book.
Yeah. And you were using the materializing of the cup as the same thing as the lion. I go, well, no, it's not. I mean, I can maybe understand an inanimate object like a cup being developed, but something that moves and lives and can kill, that's not a coffee cup. I mean, like, for instance, when the kids take them to the jousting,
the medieval times.
The medieval times, all right? So I'm like, after you see the end of the movie, it's like, so any of those knights could just walk over with a broadsword and cut Rod Steiger's head off at any time, and the only reason that it doesn't happen is because no one ever thought about it? That doesn't make any fucking sense. I understand a hologram situation that's so compelling and a reality so compelling that lions attack you and you feel as if you have been torn apart by lions. And maybe you die of a heart attack or the excruciatingness of the pain, but there actually aren't lion claws and teeth ripping your skin apart.
In Star Trek, they have gone through great lengths to explain
enough
force
about
fields.
Star Trek takes place 500 years in the fucking future. We're talking about this.
This also takes place 500 years in the future.
No, it's not for sure. That's not for sure. It's Star Trek's get out of jail free card for everything. Well, 1,000 years in the future, maybe it can happen. We're not playing the Star Trek.
It's a sophisticated tractor beam matter replication. I think that's
but also it doesn't even make sense. Exactly what you said about the idea that why would you invent something that could create killers? I mean, literally in a situation
like television or cell phones.
No, it's not the same thing. I could go into the hologram and create an entire new Nazi Germany, and now they're there. All right.
I think there's an episode of Star Trek where they do that.
And now they enough of the fucking Star Trek.
Voyager.
Enough of the Star Trek references.
This is the source for the holodeck.
No one would ever make this and sell this commercially, or there would be something. Somebody would have thought about that. But also, even the idea, even as a learning tool. Or like if the idea is you're teaching kids history and they want to see what it was like at the Battle of Little Bighorn, well, then they just conjure up the Battle of Little Bighorn and they can actually watch it.
Yeah, that's the idea.
But But that suggests that it's not like Sitting Bull is dealing with the kids. The whole concept of like, well, nobody ever assumed that this would ever happen just does not work.
Well,
all right?
the book,
especially if it's supposed to be a commercial thing that you sell and that people buy.
it's a very new device. They do establish that. But the real point of the story is about the dangers of leaving work to someone else. The dangers of letting your kids be raised by someone else. The dangers of just putting an iPad in your child's hand and thinking that it's all going to be fine and that they're not going to stumble across Pornhub or internet beheadings or like ghastly things that people shouldn't see. That, of course, they automatically seek out and do. There is a moment in the movie that is also not in the story. There's two moments. There's the one where he's talking to his kids about what it was like when he was young. I didn't ever get used to attach my pod to the energy flow and just fly away 1,500 miles. I was only allowed to go 100 miles. And he's talking like that. That actually doesn't exist in the book, his attempt, nor does the moment when, and I'm trying to remember the name of the husband and wife. I guess it doesn't matter. George, I think is his name, something like that. The husband and wife, and she says, "Make love to me," and he answers, "Why?" And they've got this dysfunctional relationship because they're used to the machines doing everything. The implication that's being made in the movie, which isn't in the book, she's got machines to do that for her. Why do you want me to do it? And this is like they've fallen into a kind of apathy about everything. Really, the story is a cautionary tale against that. The movie attempts to make it more. I noticed that
boil it down into a Twilight Zone kind of thing that has a gotcha ending.
Yeah. They attempt to do that. And sometimes Bradbury is not often the gotcha ending guy. He occasionally does a gotcha ending. In fact, 0 Hour, the story that I mentioned, does have a gotcha ending. It's kind of like a final scare moment at the end. But in The Last Night of the World, which is the final story in this one, the ethical conundrum is everyone in the world has had the same dream. We're all going to die. It's the last night of the world. And what are we going to do? And there's this kind of intellectual conversation. And then, as in the movie, the next morning comes and the world hasn't ended, but they've all conspired to kill their kids. The thing is, in the book, there is no morning. There is no waking up. There are no dead children at the end of it. There is the decision of what we're going to do. And then the understanding that this is the last night of the world. And then she comes to bed and she says, "Oh, I left the sink running. Oh, well." And they go to bed. And that's the end. Like, that's a very Bradbury style ending.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah.
It's like the world is ending and the sink is running, but if the world's ending, it doesn't matter.
Who cares? Yeah.
And this is a very,
that sounds like a need. I can even see it on the page. Actually.
Yeah. It's a very compelling story. I see why they had to do the twist, but I can also see why Bradbury would be upset a little bit at the movie because these are the kind of thematic changes that they're making.
Any of my comments about the stories is not making a reference to Ray Bradbury's original short story.
Of course.
It's only to the movie.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, and you've not even, I don't think you've read.
No, I haven't. Like, I don't like the story, the Last Night on Earth at all. The only thing that I kind of got a kick out of it, and it was ruined by the deadly way in which they did it. But at the very beginning, especially with that crazy set that they're on, at the very beginning when Rod Steiger goes to talk to Claire Bloom and talk about the end of the world, for all intents and purposes, it looked like the opening of a Superman movie. It looked like he was Jor-El, all right, coming in and talking to Susanna York and talking about how it's the end of planet Krypton. And he even looks like what you would imagine.
He's even dressed a little bit like a kind of Jor-El.
Yeah, he's not dressed like Marlon Brando, but you can imagine that's a version of Jor-El if Rod Steiger was playing Jor-El in Superman the movie.
Yeah.
My biggest problem with the third story is they fucking neuter him. It's so pretentious and it's so pious. It actually hurts his performance, as if that wig doesn't do it enough. All right. Just the piousness and the prissiness of the performance and of just the whole concept of that story is just a drag.
Bradbury is a very classy writer, and he writes about ideas and very classy ideas. And I can imagine trying to chase that, but it ends up becoming that third story, which is pretentious. It ends up coming across really pretentious.
Well, let me ask you a question. I think I'm going to know the answer to this. I've got no problem whatsoever about the idea that when they do the different stories, the three characters that we've met are playing the characters. I don't know if they pull that off as well as I've seen before, but like a movie that does that I really like, it's like the number one thing I like about it, is that independent horror film from the 70s, Screams of a Winter Night.
Yeah, sure.
Where all those kids get together to tell ghost stories, and then when you see the ghost stories, it's the kids.
Yeah.
That's the movie that actually pulled that off as well as I've ever seen anybody. It's the one thing about the movie that I like, but that actually really works. But I guess my question, though, is in the book, are they all just completely separate characters, or is there a link to Carl? Is there a link to Carl?
Not only is there not a link to Carl, there is very rarely a link back to the Illustrated Man and the framework of the story. Sometimes they'll put a little, in italics at the very end, and then he looked into the next tattoo, ... And then you're on to the next story. The few similarities that are there are not as threatening, not as thrilling, not as exciting. A lot of it is Rod Steiger bringing Rod Steiger to the show.
Look, I'm not a fan of the stories in the movie. I can't love more the first 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Just Rod Steiger, all right, as the Illustrated Man.
His performance is simply holding the entire movie together. It's incredible. And
what's really surprising is Robert Dreyfuss is very good in the first half. I've seen him in a few other things. He's in almost like a pre-Goodfellas Vegas movie from 1970 called Where It's At.
Oh, yeah.
With David Jansen and Brenda Vaccaro. And so he did a few things around this time, and I didn't think he was that good in that. But I thought he was extremely strong in the opening 20 minutes.
He's holding his own with Rod Steiger in the weaker of the two characters.
Well, he's definitely the weaker of the two characters, but actually that's the harder role. All right,
that's what I mean. It's way harder.
Yeah, playing the young boy ingenue. All right, against this raving Rod Steiger. The movie turns against him because once he becomes obsessed with the woman, the performance isn't as good. It's not really his fault. It's just they make the character nutty. And it's just, I'm not buying it. But the opening 20 minutes of Steiger's character and his fantastic dialogue, in the last few years, I've tried to watch The Illustrated Man again. And I could never get past that 20 minutes. Because every time it got to the lion story, I was like, I'm just not that interested. And so one of the reasons I chose the film, because I knew you had an affection for it, is I wanted to have an excuse
to forcibly sit through
You
got it.
And I realized that I was exactly right all this time. I'm glad that I actually saw the film all the way to the end, but I was right. And you know what? I don't give a damn about all that other shit, but that 20 minutes is so good. Rod Steiger was a leading man at that time in this. I'm a great, intense actor, and so everything was about, him being this. You wouldn't saw a movie starring Rod Steiger. The point was to see an intense performance.
Yeah.
Whether it's his homosexual military drill sergeant in The Sergeant, or it's his serial killer in No Way to Trade a Lady, also directed by Jack Smite. So he was doing a lot of kind of roles like this. I think this is his most successful. This is his leading man role. The first 5 minutes of that scene, Rod Steiger is the scariest hobo I've ever seen in a movie.
I don't like bugs, frogs, and spiders, and creepy crawly things that zing out and bite you when you're not looking.
If you came across that guy hoboing, I would be fucking terrified.
Yeah, I would too. And he's a hulking man.
Yeah.
And Robert Dreyfuss looks like who always has that kind of sweaty, handsome look. I don't know how else to describe it. He's like shiny guy.
I'll do Rod Steiger, and you be Robert Dreyfuss, and just say, hey, those are some pretty neat tattoos.
Hey, those are some nice tattoos you got there.
These are not tattoos. They're skin illustrations. Don't you ever call them tattoos again to me, and don't make me tell you again.
Get in your bag, Peek. Can I also just call out to the dog?
Oh, the dog, yeah.
So that's another thing about those scenes is they are made semi-insane by the introduction of that
his
dog.
His name is Peek, as in Pekingese.
Yeah.
But it's a pomegranate. He's a bum.
Like me
with two bums.
It is so much
And you
fun
go,
watching
you
Rod
keep him in
Steiger.
the back. He likes it in the back. He likes it hot.
He likes it hot.
I like it hot. He likes it hot.
Yeah, that's totally Rod Steiger, and he's great in it. But
For the rest of my life, anytime somebody says the word tattoo,
yeah, no, you're gonna say that.
I'm gonna say, I'm not tattoos. They are skin illustrations.
The thing is, by the end of the movie, and like I'm just gonna do a little spoiler here. By the end of the movie, like he's fallen in love with her or something. They're trying to create something that just is false.
Yeah, and it feels false.
And it feels false, and it doesn't exist, and it's not in the book, and you don't need it in the book.
And you're wondering why the
book-
kid's hanging around. I mean, it seems like they've been there all day.
In the book, it's like reading a comic book or a novel that you love. You look into one and it tells you a story, and then you can't stop. And they're beckoning you, and you just go from one to the other. And he just travels from one to the other through this long night until there's only one space left, which is the empty space,
spot.
the empty spot, in which you don't just see the future, as the box says, you see your own future. And some people don't like what they see when they look in there.
And then all of a sudden they don't like me.
Yeah, they don't like me.
And now they don't want me around.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's like. It's totally that, like.
Just talking about Rod Steiger again is making this movie get better and better and better, and it's just rising and rising and rising. And like I said, even if it's only those first 20 minutes are fucking fantastic. I could watch that every week. I could watch the first 20 minutes of this movie every fucking week. The thing that we haven't talked about is the second story.
Yeah, The Long Rain.
The Long Rain, which is about a spaceship that crashes on this planet where it's perpetual rain. So bad that this crew is lost,
Yeah,
and
it's
they're trying to find a sun dome, but they just having to exist in this rain with this maniacal leader leading them on. But actually, he's maniacal, but he's probably the only one who he's the sergeant who knows how to keep them
rains
alive.
so hard. They've been out for days and days and days, and it is just pouring rain. There's nowhere to hide from the rain.
They can't wear their helmets because that'll make them go deaf because of the sound of it. But even if they hide in the trees, it's like the sound is just too deafening.
In the book, they describe, like, if you try to lay down and sleep, it's like the moss and the algae or whatever it is on the ground kind of grabs you and holds you. It's like 1,000 hands holding you, and so they just they freak out, and you can't feel your hands and face because they've been pelted by rain for so many days.
I mean, look, here's the thing about that. If I ever read The Illustrated Man, that'll be the story I read.
Yeah.
I bet you that story is terrific.
It's only 12 pages long. You can do it.
No, but here's the thing, though. It's a very wild, out there idea, a challenging idea, shot very conventionally.
Yeah.
Now, in a strange way, that rain story, that can't be worked out good in a film. I mean, it's too boring. It's too oppressive. It's not cinematic. It's a great idea. A comic book could be done out of it. That would be fantastic. Even a radio play could be done out of it. That's fantastic. But one of the things, though, look, I got to say, I'd forgotten about this image, but this image has been in my head forever, but it was trapped. And then I saw the movie, it brought it up again. When they shoot the body to get rid of it, and all that mud just kind of comes out of nowhere and just swallows it up. That was one of the wildest images I think I had ever seen at that point of time, and I had forgotten it until we watched it the other day.
It was pretty wild looking at it the other night as well.
It was.
That was what I read into it when I looked at that is he's shot him, he's killed him, and when the minute he falls to the ground, all the algae and stuff is like, it's kind of how I read into it. That it's the planet itself like going crazy.
Well, it looks like
consuming him.
It looks like it's a combination of like you shoot the body and it kind of dissolves in a foam that is now mixed with the algae
like
and the mud
foam.
and everything. And
it was weird.
Yeah.
The book takes place on Venus.
They needed to do it one more time, though. They really needed to do it one more time so you would have a sense of what that fucking was.
Well, when Robert Dreyfuss, is gonna kill himself.
Well, I kept waiting for it. I wanted to see him do it to see if that would happen again. Yeah. The Long Rain didn't have a got you ending. Unless it's supposed to be cynical, he's fine. It's a happy ending.
It's a happy ending. It's a happy ending in the book as well, but there's an interesting change.
Happy's too strong a word, but
it's an ending.
Yeah.
There is a thematic choice that was made again by the screenwriter, he turns the entire push. We are on the Rangoon Death March or whatever it is. We are going to find the Sun Dome. And you've got one guy insisting that we keep marching. And when you find a broken Sun Dome, we're going to go to the next one. And everyone else is giving up. But this is the guy that's pushing them forward. Rod Steiger.
Yeah.
He is yelling you forward. He is forcing you to move. Everyone else is giving up. And there comes a moment when Robert Dreyfuss and him are talking, and suddenly he says, don't you want to go to the Sun Dome? You're going to get into that sun. You're going to look at that beautiful sun. You're going to get a cup of hot cocoa.
You get a Sun Dome whore.
And you're going to get some Sun Dome whores. We're going to get us some Sun Dome whores. And he's like, Robert Dreyfuss's character says, you think that I'm the kind of man that wants that? And suddenly you realize he's basically saying, like, I'm gay. I don't need to go to a whorehouse. Bradbury doesn't do that at all. You don't get to the Sun Dome. There is no woman there to put a bathrobe on you and to take your wet clothes off.
I actually thought Steiger's speech about the Sun Dome was the best a dialogue got after the first 20 minutes.
Oh, for sure. It's great dialogue. His whole thing about, like, are we going to go to that Sun Dome? In the book, they're actually on Venus. And they've been on Venus, and Venus sucks. They're at war. The Sun Domes are military bases protected by guns, to protect them from the Venusians who come up out of the sea every now and then to drag people away. Well, then they go to that broken Sun Dome. They're like, hey, what happened to all the people? Where are the bodies? They're like, oh, those Venusians. They dragged them back underwater, back into the sea.
Well, you're making it sound like that actually sounds less interesting than the movie, because the movie, you don't know what planet it is, but it's just a planet where it rains all the time. All right. If it's called the long rain, then that means it's Venus. Then maybe Venus doesn't rain all the time. It's just a long rain going on. I like the idea that it's a planet where it just rains constantly.
Well, I think he sets up Venus rains constantly. This is Venus.
Okay.
And but these are military bases. And when he goes into it, when he finally gets there alone and he enters into it, and there's the hot cocoa and there's the place to put your wet clothes and everything. There's a bunch of guys, a bunch of dudes there. It's the military, basically.
Yeah.
He's gotten back to the base.
No. I mean, look, this is basically, it's World War II. You're in the North African desert.
Sure.
You're in a tank. The tank breaks down. And now you and your 4 compatriots are just stuck in the middle of the fucking Gobi Desert.
Yeah.
And you've lost your compass.
You've got to find the equivalent of whatever a snow hut is.
Yeah,
the oasis. You've got to find the oasis.
You have to find an oasis or a military fort. You lost your bearings, and you've got an officer who is going to get you through this alive.
Yeah, this could have been a Foreign Legion story.
It absolutely could be, yeah.
And he even says, when they get to the broken one, he's like, well, once Congress gets around to it, approving it, they'll come and repair this, but it's going to be too late for us. It's like that's Bradbury's one little commentary in the middle of all of it.
Well, let me talk about how when I saw this. Okay, so I thought this trailer was fucking amazing. I even knew who Rod Steiger was when I was 7 because I'd seen In the Heat of the Night. We go see the film, and I'm watching it, and that first 20 minutes is going on, and I'm liking it. And then it starts with the lion story. And now it's like in the future, and it's still Rod Steiger.
See, even back then, Quentin wants hillbillies and hobos, and in the 30s, he doesn't want to be in the future.
I'm not quite sophisticated enough at 7 to think that Rod Steiger is just playing another character in the story, all right? It looks like, is this a flashback? I mean, I knew what flashbacks was. Is this a flashback? But why is this flashback taking place on a spaceship?
Yeah.
And what are the lions doing on a space? I mean, I'm 7, all right? And I'm trying to put it together. And then I fell asleep. And then I wake up and the lions are eating them. And then it's Rod Steiger as the illustrated man and Robert Dreyfuss again. And then I fall asleep again. And every time I wake up, I'm in the middle of something else.
Some other movie.
I have no idea where I am. So I wake up again and I'm in the middle of some fucking rain with these soldiers. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And then I fall asleep again. And then I wake up, and every time I woke up, I had no idea where I was. I went back to sleep until I finally woke up for the closing bit. So I've remembered the closing bit my entire life. Okay, so let me read Michael Weldon's review.
Yeah, I've got a quote from Vincent Canby here as well.
Okay, you want to start with your Vincent
Sure, mine
Canby
is
quote?
very short because I just thought it was funny. Because the film was something of a critical disappointment. But Vincent Canby wrote for the New York Times, everything remains fetus-like and underdeveloped, although shrouded in misty pretensions of grandeur. I think all of that is true, but I actually kind of don't mind it. I still sort of, I mean, Rod Steiger's so good. And I love science fiction so much.
He's so good at it. Okay, so Michael Weldon of the Psychotronic Encyclopedia of Film writes, most reviewers blasted this adaptation of three famous Ray Bradbury stories. Rod Steiger and Claire Bloom star in all three stories. In the connecting segments, set in 1933, Steiger is the tattooed man and Claire Bloom is the mysterious tattoo artist from the future. The Long Rain episode is great. It even features Jason Evers from The Brain That Wouldn't Die. The Veldt and Last Night of the World are the other stories.
Just laying it out. And, you know, the ultimately, the real problem is that the screenwriter is attempting to tie it all together and have these stories connect
to turn it into a movie.
But the fact of the matter is these stories are not connected with each other. They are just disconnected short stories.
Well, Ray Bradbury is known for taking a bunch of random short stories he did,
doing a collage
and jerry-rigging them into a novel.
Yeah, Martian Chronicles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
but that's why it was really bizarre, because in the Martian Chronicles, they're not that random, though. They all have Martians in them. They all paint a mosaic.
He wrote a lot about Venus and Mars. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. But the Martian Chronicles, I think, creates a mosaic with Martians in it to some degree, where
it tells the story of human history traveling to and from Mars.
So I expected it to be more thematic connection between the stories and the wraparound story. And then that was one of the things when we were watching it. At a certain point, I was like, well, this is just fucking Night Gallery.
Yeah.
And you go, no, it's exactly Night Gallery.
Not that there's anything wrong with Night Gallery. I love Night Gallery.
I know, but I just didn't expect something so bloody random.
Yeah, with a kind of Stendhal syndrome, as part of it.